to it. I haven't been to Palisade Park in the Heights for a very long time. And I'm here right now, and there's a bunch of fucking coffee shops everywhere. And they're like fancy. They ain't that nasty ass coffee shop, like Dunkin' Donuts and shit you find in the hood. There's some nice ass coffee shops. And then you got like people walking their dog. You got a nice ass fucking water fountain when you walk into the park. But yeah, y'all can't fix these fucking potholes. Breaking my car.
You know that feeling when you think you already know a place, and then you actually go there, and none of it looks the way you imagined? That's exactly what's been happening to thousands of Europeans lately. For years, most people across Europe built their idea of America out of scraps: a news clip here, a viral video there, a Hollywood movie, an angry comment thread. Piece it all together, and you get a picture that's, honestly, kind of exhausting. Divided. Expensive. A little chaotic. A country that, according to the headlines, might be losing its shine. But then people started actually going. For work. For vacations. To visit family. And a strange thing kept happening. They landed expecting one country and found something else waiting for them. Not a perfect place, let's be clear. Nobody's claiming that. But not the place they'd been picturing either. So what actually happens when a European steps off that plane for the first time? What surprises them? What annoys them? What do they never stop talking about once they get home? That's what we're digging into today. Real reactions, real contrasts, real moments from the ones who went to find out for themselves. Because sometimes the most interesting discovery isn't a new country. It's realizing how wrong your own assumptions were. Here's the thing about expectations: nobody builds them on purpose. They just accumulate. A scene from a TV show. A clip your cousin sent you. A headline you scrolled past at 11 p.m. And after enough of that, you start to feel like you already understand a country you've never actually set foot in. For a lot of Europeans, America meant a strange mashup of ideas. Endless traffic. Cities that never sleep, or cities that never feel safe. Fast food on every corner and nothing else. A place so different from home that ordinary life there might barely resemble life anywhere in Europe. Except, and this is where it gets interesting, America was never one thing to begin with. It's 50 states. Thousands of towns. More cultural variety packed into one country than most people can wrap their heads around from a distance. And that, more than anything, is what caught people off guard. Not that America turned out better, or worse, than they expected. It's that no single idea, no headline, no stereotype could ever really capture it. For most travelers, the first real surprise doesn't happen on the ground. It happens in the air, staring out the window as the plane starts its descent. Because that's usually the moment it hits them: this country is enormous. The highways look like they stretch off the edge of the earth. The parking lots alone could swallow a small European town. Neighborhoods just keep going, mile after mile, long after you think they should have ended. And then you land. And you still have an hour's drive ahead of you to actually reach the city. That's when it really sinks in: this isn't a country, not in the way Europeans usually think about countries. It's closer to a continent that happens to share one government. Back home, hopping between major cities might take a couple of hours on a train. In America, you can drive for half a day and technically still be in the same state. It sounds like a small detail. It isn't. That single fact reshapes everything: how people commute, how cities are built, how far the nearest grocery store actually is. Some travelers find that scale thrilling. Others find it genuinely disorienting. But almost everyone says the same thing afterward: no photo, no map, nothing really prepares you for how big it actually feels once you're standing in it. Before the trip, most people picture America through a handful of postcard cities. New York, LA, Miami, Chicago. Each one already has a whole personality attached to it before you've even booked the flight. Then you actually visit more than one, and the illusion falls apart fast. New York doesn't walk, it moves: fast, loud, relentless. Boston feels like history and ambition sharing the same sidewalk. Chicago will stop you mid-step just to admire a building. And Austin? Austin feels like a completely different country from San Francisco, even though they're only a few hours apart by plane. The accents shift. The food shifts. Even the rhythm of daily life, how fast people walk, how they greet each other, what time dinner happens, changes from state to state. It stops feeling like one nation with one identity, and starts feeling like dozens of smaller nations, all stitched together under the same flag. And that, for a lot of first-time visitors, becomes the real story of their trip, not any single city, but the sheer impossibility of reducing the whole country down to one experience. Every city tells its own story. And somehow, every traveler still walks away with a completely different opinion of the place. Ask most Europeans what surprised them the most about America, and you'd expect them to talk about the skyscrapers. Or the highways. Or the size of a medium soda. Instead, almost every single one says the same thing. It was the people. Some had braced themselves for distance, cold interactions, rushed small talk, the kind of impersonal efficiency they associated with big, busy places. What they got instead caught them completely off guard. A cashier who genuinely asked how their day was going and waited for the answer. A stranger holding the door 2-3 seconds longer than necessary, just to make sure it reached them. Someone in line at a coffee shop striking up a full conversation like they'd known each other for years. For visitors coming from cultures where public interactions tend to stay a bit more reserved, these moments landed harder than they expected. Now, to be fair, America isn't one uniform culture of friendliness. Depending on the region, depending on the city, the tone changes. But enough travelers came home saying the same thing that it's hard to ignore. The openness caught them off guard, in the best way. Some admitted they weren't even sure at first whether people meant it, or whether it was just habit. Politeness on autopilot. But after a few days, most stopped questioning it and started genuinely enjoying it. It wasn't something they packed for. But it's often the first thing they mention when someone asks, "So, how was America?" Somewhere around day 3 or 4, the excitement settles, and something quieter takes over, the realization that everyday life here just runs differently. Not worse. Not better. Just different, in ways that sneak up on you. Grocery stores feel less like shops and more like small cities of their own, aisle after aisle, an entire wall dedicated to cereal, more choices for one product than most people back home would ever need. Restaurant portions arrive looking like they were meant for 2 people, not 1. And then there's the driving. In a lot of Europe, you can step out your front door and walk to a bakery, a pharmacy, a train stop. In much of America, that same walk simply doesn't exist, because it was never built for walking in the first place. At first, that feels strange. Almost inconvenient. But give it a few days, and the logic starts to reveal itself. This is a country with space to spare, and a population spread thin across it. The car isn't a preference here, it's a structural necessity, baked into how these cities grew. Some travelers loved the freedom that came with it, the space, the independence, the ability to go anywhere, anytime. Others missed the walkable streets, the corner shops, the train ride home without ever touching a steering wheel. Neither reaction is wrong. If anything, that split reaction is the real takeaway, proof that geography and history quietly shape a culture in ways most people never stop to think about, until they're standing in the middle of it. If you'd asked most Europeans, before the trip, to describe American food in one sentence, you'd probably get some version of burgers, fries, and everything fried. And sure, that version exists. It's not a myth. But it's also nowhere near the whole picture. Wander into a Saturday farmer's market and you'll find produce so fresh it barely resembles anything from a supermarket back home. Duck into a neighborhood run by immigrant families and you might eat some of the most authentic food you've had anywhere outside the country it actually came from. And the regional differences are their own kind of education. Smoky, slow-cooked barbecue in Texas. Fresh seafood pulled straight from the coast in New England. Sharp, spice-driven Tex-Mex out west. A deep-dish pizza in Chicago that barely resembles pizza anywhere else on earth. Portion sizes, admittedly, do live up to the stereotype. That part checks out. But the idea that American food is somehow all the same doesn't survive more than a few days of actually eating your way across the country. Food, it turns out, is just one more example of the same pattern, a nation that refuses to be summed up in a single sentence. Ask any European planning a US trip what worries them most, and safety usually comes up before anything else. It makes sense. International headlines don't exactly go out of their way to reassure anyone. So a lot of travelers arrive a little tense. A little more alert than usual. And the honest answer they come back with is, it's complicated. Yes, some neighborhoods, in some cities, genuinely call for caution. That's real, and no one should pretend otherwise. But that's also true of major cities almost anywhere in the world, Europe included. What surprised most visitors is that the places they actually spent their time, downtown districts, tourist landmarks, quiet suburban towns, national parks, usually felt no different from walking around back home. A few travelers put it best: the news doesn't cover the boring afternoons. Nobody writes a headline about a peaceful walk through a small town in Ohio. But one dramatic incident in a major city? That travels around the world in hours. None of this erases the real conversations happening inside American communities about safety. Those concerns are genuine, and they matter. But for the visitor just passing through, the lived experience was often calmer, quieter, and far less dramatic than the headlines had prepared them for. Somewhere between the cities and the highways, a lot of travelers stumble onto the part of America nobody warned them about. Its landscapes. Standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon, most people go quiet not because they weren't expecting it to be big, but because no photo ever prepared them for exactly how big. National parks stretch across land larger than entire European countries. The coastline shifts dramatically depending on where you stand: rugged and moody in the Pacific Northwest, warm and tropical in Florida, wild and untouched in Alaska. For travelers used to crossing into an entirely new country after a few hours on the road, there's something almost disorienting about realizing a single American road trip can pass through desert, mountains, forest, and coastline all without a single border crossing. And it's often out here, far from any city skyline, in front of something too vast to photograph properly, that America surprises people the most. By the time the trip wraps up, most Europeans admit the same thing, almost word for word. America didn't match the picture they walked in with. It wasn't only skyscrapers, or only small towns. Not only wealth, or only hardship. Not only warm strangers, or only chaos and headlines. It was all of it at once, spread across a landmass too enormous for any single story to hold. Some come home more critical than when they left of the healthcare costs, the dependence on cars, the sharpness of the political divide. Others come home with a new kind of appreciation for the openness of strangers, the scale of the landscapes, the sheer, stubborn variety hiding inside one country. But almost everyone lands on the same final thought. You can watch 1,000 videos, read 100 articles, and still not really understand a place until you've stood in it yourself. So where does that leave us? Maybe it means the world is a lot messier, and a lot more interesting, than headlines and highlight reels ever let on. Maybe it means every country, America very much included, is too complicated to fit inside one story. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe the only real way to understand a place is still the oldest way there is. Go. Look around. Talk to people. Let yourself be wrong about something. If this trip through other people's eyes gave you something to think about, drop a comment and tell us, have you been to America? Did it match what you expected, or did it completely rewrite it? And if you want more stories like this one, stick around, subscribe to European Insight Hub, because this is just the beginning. Until next time, stay curious, keep questioning what you think you know, and keep that passport ready.